The first thing my father-in-law ever said about me, he said to a room full of cattlemen while I was standing close enough to hear every word. He said, "Cole went and married the animal doctor." And the room laughed. And that was the whole of it. The animal doctor. Like a stray that had wandered onto the place and been allowed to stay. For 20 years, Hollis Vaughn made sure I understood I was a guest on land I had bled into the dirt for. I am going to tell you about the sale day he finally learned what 20 years of his contempt had actually been building, right under his nose, the whole time. But first you have to know about the winter that should have ended the Vaughn Ranch, and didn't, because of me. My name is Hazel. I am 47 years old, and I am a veterinarian in a stretch of Montana where the ranches run bigger than some towns, and the mountains keep the weather honest. I spend my days with patients who cannot tell me where it hurts. A cow will hide her pain until the hour she goes down, because in the language her body still speaks, showing weakness is how you get left behind. So I have spent my whole life learning to read the thing a creature is trying not to show me. I can walk a pen and tell you which animal is sick before she knows it herself. It turns out that is a useful skill in a family, too. It turns out people hide their cruelty about as well as a cow hides a fever, which is to say, not from someone who has spent her life learning where to look. My father was a mechanic, and people think that is a strange road to becoming a vet, but it is not. He taught me that a thing which is breaking always tells you first, if you know how to listen. A knock in an engine, a shimmy in a wheel, a sound underneath the sound. I just carried that into a different kind of body. The first time I knew I truly had the gift for it, I was 19, working a summer at a clinic, and an old rancher brought in a mare that 3 other people had called perfectly fine. And I put my hands on her, and I knew, the way you know, that she was in quiet agony and had been for weeks, hiding it because a prey animal that limps is a prey animal that gets eaten. We found the abscess buried deep in her foot that afternoon. The rancher cried. I did not, but something in me settled into the shape it has held ever since. I am the person who believes the creature everyone else has decided is fine. I have built an entire life on the simple act of taking suffering seriously when the suffering has learned to stay quiet. Keep that in mind, because for 20 years, the suffering I trained myself to stay quiet about was my own. If you have ever poured years into a family that kept you standing just outside the circle, close enough to work, but never close enough to belong, then I think you already know the particular cold I am describing. Tell me in the comments what state you are watching from, and whether there is someone in your life who has spent years being respected by everyone but you. I read every single one. There is a strange comfort in a room full of people who all learned the same lesson alone. Let me tell you how I came to love a place that never loved me back. I met Cole at a bull sale when I was 26 and already 3 years into my own practice. And I will be honest, I fell for the ranch almost as fast as I fell for him. I had grown up in town, the daughter of a mechanic, and the Vaughn place was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. 4,000 acres running up into the foothills, cattle scattered across it like the land was breathing them. Cole was kind, in a quiet, beaten-down way I did not fully understand until later. And Hollis Vaughn was a legend in that county. He had taken a struggling outfit from his own father and built it into the operation everyone measured themselves against. And when he walked into the sale barn, men who owned thousands of acres themselves stood up a little straighter. I wanted him to like me so badly, it embarrasses me to say it now. I thought, if a man like that decides you are worthy, then you are. That was my first mistake, handing a hard man the power to decide whether I was worth anything. There was one Vaughn who saw me, and she was already dying by the time I married in. Cole's mother, Lorna, had lived 40 years in the weather of Hollis and had gone soft and quiet under it the way Cole had. But there was still something lit in her, way back behind her eyes. She found me in the kitchen at my own wedding, took both my hands and said, You're going to have to be stronger than I was, honey. Don't let him make you small. I let him make me small, and I have spent my whole life sorry for it. I did not understand it then. I thought she was just an old woman being sentimental on a wedding day. She died 2 years later, and at her funeral, Hollis stood up and praised what a good ranch wife she had been, which was the only kind of praise he had for a woman. Praise for being useful and quiet. And I watched Cole's face while his father did it, and I finally understood the family I had married into, the kind where the warm ones get worn down to nothing, and the hard ones call that love. Lorna had tried to warn me from the very edge of her own grave. It took me 18 more years to actually hear her. He decided early, and he decided no, and he never once revisited it in 20 years. But here is the thing about Hollis, the thing that made it so hard to name for so long. He was never loud about it. He did not forbid the marriage or rage at me or throw me off the place. A man like Hollis does not need to. His contempt was a quiet, patient weather, and it wore on me the way wind wears on a fence post, so slowly that from one day to the next, you could never point to the damage. But stand back 20 years, and the post is half its width. He called me the animal doctor, never Hazel, the way Sloane in another family might have called someone an accessory. Except Hollis's version came in a low, flat cowboy drawl that the whole county read as charming. He would ask my professional opinion in front of the hands and then do the exact opposite, just to show everyone whose ranch it was. When I was right, and I was usually right, he never mentioned it again. When I was wrong, even once, he mentioned it for years. Now, you have to understand what I gave to that place, because without it, the rest is just a sad woman complaining about a rude old man. And that is not the story. The story is what it cost. The winter I told you about came in the 8th year of my marriage. It came down out of the mountains in November and did not let up until March. The kind of cold that kills, 40 below with the wind, week after week. And the Vaughn herd got sick. It started as a few coughing heifers, and I knew within a day what it was, because reading The Thing a Creature is Hiding is my whole life. And I told Hollis we were looking at the start of something that could take the entire calf crop and a good share of the cows if we did not move hard and move now. Hollis told me I was overreacting. The animal doctor, getting excited. He had run cattle through 40 winters, and he was not going to be told how by his son's wife. So I did it anyway. I want you to hear that, because it is the hinge of everything. I did not wait for his blessing, because the animals did not have time for his pride. For 6 weeks, I more or less lived in those pens. I was out there at every hour the cold allowed, and a good many it didn't, pulling sick animals, running treatments, teaching the hands what to watch for, sleeping in my truck with the heater running between rounds, because driving the icy road home and back cost animals I could save with that hour. I lost weight I did not have to lose. I got frostbite on 2 fingertips that still go white every winter to remind me. And I held that herd together. When the thaw finally came in March, the Vaughn Ranch had lost a handful of animals, where every other outfit in the valley had lost a third of theirs or more. People still talk about that winter. They credit Hollis. They say old Hollis Vaughn brought his herd through the bad winter like the cattleman he is. He never corrected them, not once. He stood in the sale barn that spring and accepted the admiration for the thing I had done with my own frostbitten hands. And when a man clapped him on the back and said he did not know how he had pulled it off, Hollis said, "You just don't quit. You just don't quit." I was standing right there. I had not quit. I had not slept. And he took it, smooth as anything, and never even glanced my way. That was the moment I understood that no amount of bleeding for the Vaughn name was ever going to make me a Vaughn. The contributions did not count because the person making them did not count. And the person did not count because she was not blood. You cannot earn your way out of not being blood. That was the wall. And I spent the next 12 years walking into it. And the winter was only the loudest of it. For 20 years, I was the one the Vaughn Ranch called at 3 in the afternoon and 3 in the morning alike. Calving season nights with my arm inside a heifer in a freezing barn while Hollis slept warm in the house. Prolapses and twisted guts and the 100 small emergencies that are the actual texture of keeping animals alive. I never once sent the family a bill. I told myself it was love, and it was, but it was also me still trying, 20 years in, to do the one thing that might finally make the old man nod. Every other ranch in that valley paid me in money for that work. The Vaughn Ranch paid me in the privilege of being called the animal doctor by a man who would not say my name. And I kept showing up anyway, because the animals did not care about my standing in the family. They only cared that someone competent came when they were dying. Being needed by something honest is its own kind of belonging. Even when the people around it will not give you any, I can give you the exact shape of the smaller cuts. 1 night out of 100, just like it. The County Cattlemen's Association held a dinner every winter, and the year a bad scours outbreak swept the valley, they gave a small award to the Vaughn Ranch for the lowest calf losses around. They called Hollis up. He took the little plaque and the applause, and in his remarks, he thanked his hands, and he thanked the good Lord, and he thanked his late wife's memory. And then, because somebody must have told him it was the gracious thing to do, he waved a hand vaguely toward our table and said, "And of course, we've got the animal doctor, keeping an eye on things." Keeping an eye on things. I had been up to my elbows in that outbreak for 3 weeks. I had saved more of those calves with my own hands than I could count. And I sat at that table in my good dress, and I smiled and clapped for a man accepting a plaque for my work, while 200 people I respected filed me away as a footnote in Hollis Vaughn's speech. That is what it is. The thing I am trying to describe to you, it is not one big wound you can point to and name. It is 1,000 small public subtractions, each one too minor to object to without looking like the one with the problem, until you look up one day and find you have been subtracted all the way down to a woman keeping an eye on things. The cruelty climbed the way it always does, from the things at the edges toward the things at the center. For years, it was just the credit, the drawl, the overruling. Then it started reaching toward the thing I actually loved, which was the land and the animals and the future of the place. Because there was a question hanging over the Vaughn Ranch, the question that hangs over every ranch eventually, which was, who gets it when Hollis is gone? Cole was the only son. By every ordinary measure, the place should have gone to Cole, and through Cole, in the ordinary way of marriages, partly to me, the two of us running it into the next generation. But Hollis could not stomach that, because running it with Cole meant running it with me, and the idea of the animal doctor having a real say in Vaughnland was the one thing the old man could not abide. So he found himself another heir. Cole had a cousin, Bryce, his late sister's boy, a Vaughn by blood on the side Hollis cared about. And Bryce was everything Hollis told himself a cattleman should be: loud, hard on stock, quick to call any gentleness weakness. Hollis started bringing Bryce in, giving him responsibilities, talking about him at the sale barn the way he had never once talked about Cole. And the message under it was not subtle to anyone who could read what a man was hiding. The ranch was going to skip the son who married the outsider and go to the blood that married right. And Cole, my Cole, who had spent his whole life trying to earn one approving word from his father and never gotten it, just absorbed it, the way he had been trained since boyhood to absorb everything Hollis did. And it broke my heart to watch, because I knew exactly what that training felt like. We were both of us standing just outside the same circle, him by never being enough, me by never being blood. Here is the part where I have to tell you, I started to believe I was the problem. Because Bryce was dangerous, I saw it the way I see a fever before it shows. He cut corners with the stock that no real cattleman cuts, mixing in animals from sale yards without proper checks, pushing stock too hard, ignoring the early signs of sickness because slowing down looked weak to him, and looking weak in front of Hollis was the one thing Bryce feared. I warned Cole, I warned Hollis, once, carefully, and Hollis looked at me like I had confirmed everything he already believed. The jealous outsider wife trying to tear down the blood heir to clear the way for her own husband. After that, I understood that every true thing I said about Bryce would be heard as the opposite of true, would be heard as ambition, as spite, as the animal doctor reaching above her station. So I went quiet on it, and I hated myself for going quiet, because going quiet about a dangerous man is how people get hurt. And in my line of work, the ones who get hurt are the ones who cannot speak for themselves at all. I will give you one example, because the example is the entire pattern. The spring before all of this, Bryce decided a sick calf was faking it, said it was just lazy, said I babied the stock, and he refused to let me treat it, because treating it in front of the hands would have made him look soft and made me look right. And Hollis backed him, the way Hollis always backed the blood. That calf died over 3 slow days of a thing I could have stopped in an afternoon. I had to stand at the fence and watch an animal suffer and die to protect a grown man's pride. And when it was finally over, Bryce said the animal doctor must have misjudged it, and Hollis nodded, and that was the end of it. I went home, and I was sick over it for a week, and not only for the calf, for what it told me about where the whole thing was headed. Because a man who will let an animal die rather than be corrected is a man who will let a great deal more than that die rather than be corrected. And Hollis was about to hand him 4,000 acres and the trust of an entire valley. I knew it the way I know a fever, and I could not get one single person with the power to act to believe me, because the man I was warning them about was the man they had all already decided to love. There was a night, that last fall, that I nearly walked away from all of it. Bryce had run a batch of new cattle onto the place without telling me, the way he'd taken to doing, and one of them, a young cow, went down in the night. And by the time a hand came and got me, she was suffering in a way no animal should have to. I did the only merciful thing there was to do, out there in the dark with the wind coming down off the mountains, and then I drove the long way home, alone. And I sat in my truck in my own yard with the engine ticking as it cooled, and I thought, I am done. I am 47 years old, and I have spent half my life loving a place that calls me the animal doctor, and a family that is handing the future to a man who lets animals die for his pride. I could just go. I could keep my practice and lose the Vaughns and never again stand in a sale barn watching a man take credit for my frostbite. I had the truck keys in my hand and a whole road in front of me. What turned me around was not a grand thing. It was Gil. Gil had been the Vaughn foreman for 30 years, a weathered, close-mouthed man who had worked beside Hollis longer than I had been alive, and who I had always assumed was Hollis's man through and through. He had followed me out that night to help with the cow, and as I sat there with my keys in my hand, he leaned on my truck window and he said, in about as many words as Gil ever used, "That winter, the bad one, we all know who pulled us through it. Every hand on this place knows. Old man can say what he wants in the barn. Out here, we know." And then he straightened up and said, "Be a shame for the ones who know to lose you to the one who don't." And he walked off to the bunkhouse. I sat there a long time, because for 20 years I had believed I was the only one who saw the truth, the lone witness, the jealous wife imagining things. And it turned out the men who did the actual work had seen all of it, all along. They just had no more standing to say it out loud than I did. We were a whole company of people who knew, all of us trained to keep quiet around the man who owned the place. I did not make a plan that night either. I want to be honest about that, because I think people want these stories to turn into schemes. I did not scheme. What I decided, sitting in that truck, was only this. The next time the truth needed saying, I was going to say it plainly, no matter who it cost me, because that is the one thing my whole life had actually trained me for. Reading the pain a creature hides and then telling the truth about it, out loud, even when the truth is hard. I had done it for 20 years for animals who could not thank me. I had just never once done it for myself. The sale day came in October. Hollis had built it into the biggest production sale the Vaughn Ranch had ever held. 200 head of bred cattle, buyers coming in from 3 states and the whole county there to watch. And he had built it, everyone understood, as Bryce's coronation. This was the day Hollis was going to stand up in front of every cattleman who mattered and hand the future to the blood heir, with Cole standing off to the side where he had always stood, and me standing further off than that. The animals would be inspected and certified sound, the way they are at any real sale, and the buyers would trust that certification because the certifying veterinarian for the whole valley, the one whose word those buyers had relied on for 20 years, was me. And that is the thing Hollis had forgotten. In all his years of calling me the animal doctor, like it was nothing, he had spent 20 years making sure I had no standing inside his family. He had never once noticed that out in the wider world, the world of buyers and brands and a vet's signature, I had quietly become the most trusted name in the valley. My word moved cattle. My signature was the thing that let a buyer from 2 states away wire money for animals he had not raised. I had built that, one honest call at a time, over 20 years, while Hollis was busy not seeing me. 3 days before the sale, I walked the sale string the way I always did, and I found what I knew I would find. Bryce, rushing to fill out the numbers for his big day, had folded in a group of those unchecked sale yard cattle, and they were carrying the early signs of exactly the kind of sickness that could move through a sale string and out into 3 states' worth of herds. It was hidden well. An ordinary eye would have passed them as sound, but reading the thing a creature is hiding is my whole life. I knew within the hour. I went to Hollis, not to threaten him, to give him the chance to do the right thing himself, which I think you have to do, even with a man who has never given you the same courtesy. I told him plainly what was in his sale string and what it would mean to certify those animals and send them out to other people's ranches. And Hollis Vaughn looked at me on the eve of the biggest day of his legacy, with 200 buyers coming and Bryce's coronation set, and he told me to certify the string. He said the animal doctor was, as usual, seeing problems where there were none, and that I would sign the health papers like I had every other year. And I would do it because I was a Vaughn, and Vaughns protected the ranch. A Vaughn. The first time in 20 years he had ever called me one, and he reached for it only in the moment he needed me to put my name on a lie. I did not raise my voice. I have spent my life being calm in the presence of suffering, because panic helps nothing that is hurting. I just said, I won't sign off on sick cattle. Hollis, not for you, not for the Vaughn name, not for anybody. Those animals don't go in that ring, or if they do, they go in with the truth on them. And I left him standing in the barn, and I did not sleep that night, and I did not change my mind. Sale day. The buyers came, and the county came, and the ring filled up, and Hollis stood at the front of it all in his good hat, ready for his legacy. And when the sale string came up, I did the thing I had decided to do in my truck that night. I stood at the rail with my certification book in my hand and my heart going hard, and I will not pretend I was not afraid. 20 years of training tells a woman to keep the peace, to not make the scene, to sign the paper and swallow whatever it costs. And that training does not go quiet just because you have finally decided it is wrong. I looked across the ring at Hollis in his good hat, and a part of me was certain I would fold the way I always had. And then I looked at the buyers I had spent 20 years earning, men who had wired fortunes on nothing but the strength of my word. And I looked at the cattle standing in that ring, who could not say a single thing about what was being done to them or through them. I thought about Lorna telling me not to let him make me small. I thought about Gil leaning on my truck saying, "Out here, we know." I thought about a calf I had watched die at a fence to keep a proud man comfortable. The fear did not leave. I just stopped letting it drive. I did not make a scene. I did not need to. When the auctioneer looked to me for the health certification that every sale in that valley had run on for 20 years, I stood up, calm as you like, and I said, plainly, so the buyers could hear it, that I could not certify a portion of this string as sound, that there were animals in it carrying sickness that should not be sold into another man's herd, and that I would not put my name to anything that said otherwise. And then I sat down. You have never heard a sale barn go so quiet, because every buyer in that room knew my name. They had trusted my signature for 20 years. And when the most trusted vet in the valley stands up and says a string isn't sound, the string isn't sound, no matter whose hat is at the front of the ring. The sale stopped. The bad cattle were pulled, and in front of 200 cattlemen and the whole county, it became plain, without my saying one cruel word, that Hollis Vaughn had tried to sell sick animals to his neighbors to protect a coronation, and that the only person on the Vaughn place with the integrity to stop it was the outsider he had spent 20 years calling the animal doctor. For a moment, nobody in that barn moved. Then a buyer I had worked with for 15 years, a big, careful man from over near the river, stood up and said, to the room more than to anyone in it, "If Hazel says they're not sound, then they're not sound. I have never known her to be wrong, and I have never known her to bend." And he sat back down. And one by one, in the small ways cattlemen show a thing, the room sided with him and not with the hat at the front of the ring. For 20 years, Hollis had spent every day teaching his own family that my word was worth nothing. He had simply never once bothered to check what my word was worth to the people who actually bought and sold on the strength of it, because those people stood outside his circle, and Hollis never looked outside his circle, because inside it, he was a king. That was the flaw in the whole 20-year project. He had built his contempt for me on the quiet certainty that no one who mattered would ever weigh my word against his. And on the single day it counted, in front of the entire valley, every person who mattered did exactly that and chose mine. Here is the cold part, and I will not pretend it does not satisfy me, because after 20 years, it does. Hollis did not lose the ranch that day. I never wanted the ranch. What he lost was the thing he had actually built his whole life on, which was not the 4,000 acres. It was his standing. It was the unquestioned respect of every man in that valley, the thing that made cattlemen stand up straighter when he walked in. He spent all of it in one afternoon, trying to launder Bryce's recklessness through my signature, and the valley watched him do it. Bryce was finished as an heir the moment the buyers saw what his corner cutting had nearly done to them, and Hollis had to stand there in his good hat and absorb the thing he had spent 20 years making sure I absorbed instead, which is the public knowledge that the person everyone trusts is not the one with the loudest name. He had to watch his own legacy be saved in front of everyone by the blood he did not want. And Cole stood up. That is the part I carry, my husband. who had spent 40-some years absorbing his father in silence, stood up in that sale barn, walked the length of it to where I sat, and stood next to me, in front of his father and the whole county, and put his hand on my shoulder and did not say a word, because none was needed. He had spent his whole life waiting for his father to claim him. That afternoon, he stopped waiting and claimed himself, and stood with the one person who had always seen him. Hollis watched his son cross a room to choose the animal doctor over the Vaughn name, and whatever the old man felt, he had 30 years of quiet to feel it in. It did not all resolve in a week, the way these things never do. Hollis and I have not become friends, and we are not going to. But the weather between us changed, because weather can only push on you for as long as you keep standing in the same spot, and I had finally moved. He still owns the ranch. Cole and I run more of it every year now, the right way, the patient way, and the hands are glad of it. Gil retired last spring, and at his own party, he shook my hand and called me Hazel, which Hollis has still never once managed, and which I have discovered I no longer need him to. Bryce drifted off to a job in a county where nobody has learned yet to watch him. And Hollis is an old man now, in a valley that knows exactly what he tried to do at that sale, and he has to carry that knowledge in the one place he ever truly lived, which was the regard of other men. I never took a single thing from him. I only stopped holding up my end of a story that was never true to begin with. I spend my days with creatures who cannot say where it hurts. So let me leave you with the truest thing that work has taught me. A sick animal will look sound right up until the day she falls, because she has learned that showing the truth gets her left behind. People are the same. The cruel ones learn to look like pillars. The kind ones learn to look like they do not mind. And a whole community can stand around a thing that is rotting and call it strong for years, because nobody withstanding will say the plain word out loud. If you are the one who sees it, the one who has been reading the hidden thing while everyone praises the loud man at the front of the ring, you do not have to scheme, and you do not have to shout. You only have to refuse, once, when it counts, to put your name to the lie. Tell the plain truth about what is sick, out loud, in the daylight. The loud name will not survive it. What is honest will still be standing when the dust comes down.